Hello and good welcome. Sorry we're starting a little bit late. Welcome to Development Control B. We haven't got any planned, so the fire alarm does sound. It's out through the main entrance that you came in through. We'll move on now to... Oh, do we have... We've got the terms of reference for noting as item 5.
Yep, Chair. Just to run through those procedural items, the confirmation of you as Chair, confirmation of Chris Windows as Vice Chair, and then also confirmation of the membership of the committee, which is item 4, and the terms of reference, item 5. And then 6 is the proposed dates for the rest of the municipal year, which need to be agreed by the committee.
All those in favour? Yep. Okay, great, fabulous. Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for absence or any substitutions?
We've had an apology from Chris Windows, and the Conservative group haven't been able to find a substitute for him.
Okay, lovely. And do we have any declarations of interest for anything on the agenda today? No? Good, great. And the minutes of the previous meeting, item number 9, happy to approve that? Any issues taken with that? No? Good, great, fabulous, thank you very much. Okay, moving swiftly on to item number 10, the action sheet.
I think there's actually nothing on the action sheet, Chair. Everything has been picked up from previous meetings.
Excellent. So then item 11 is appeals. Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Main thing I just wanted to cover in the appeals section this time around related to an application that this committee decided, and also you'll have seen the appeal decision that when it came out, I think it came out the day after the last time we met, because I said the decision was due shortly. This relates to the Windmill Public House in Windmill Hill. So all members of the committee will have seen the decision, but I just wanted to kind of briefly go through the kind of the headlines of that decision for you. The committee decided to refuse permission for the proposed conversion of the public house into flats. The officer recommendation had been to approve, but committee felt that the applicants had failed the policy tests, that they hadn't demonstrated that it was not viable to continue to run the pub. And also there was not a satisfactory range of alternative provision in the locality, and therefore committee felt that it failed that policy and refused permission. So the decision then was appealed to the Secretary of State, or the Planning Inspectorate, acting on behalf of the Secretary of State, and the appeal was dealt with through written representations. Members will see from the appeal decision itself, the inspector goes into a lot of detail about the definition of what the locality is, what alternative provision may look like. The inspector also acknowledged that within the locality, walking routes, if they were perceived to be unsafe, particularly with respect to community members and persons from underrepresented groups, felt that this was material, and therefore the inspector clarified that they had due regard to the public sector equality duty as well. So the inspector went into quite a bit of detail about which pubs and alternative locations they felt wouldn't be a satisfactory alternative, but also those that would be in their opinion. The inspector concluded that, based on the evidence before them, that there were 2 existing alternative provisions within a short walk within 200 metres, together with a further 8 that were accessible along routes that the inspector felt were safe and were within a reasonable walking distance. Therefore, the inspector did conclude that the application did satisfy that criteria of the policy, in their opinion. But it was, and whilst that was disappointing to read from a committee decision point of view, I think, you know, the inspector did go into quite a lot of detail and accepted sort of the basis of which the committee made those points, really, which was good. And therefore, the inspector, you know, I think repeated the advice that we'd given at the committee as well, that you only have to satisfy one of those criteria. So therefore, as the inspector felt that it met the alternative provision criteria, the inspector didn't go into the viability argument at all. But obviously it was right that the committee did and kind of covered both angles, really. So based on that, the inspector allowed the appeal and granted planning permission for the conversion. Now, the applicants, the appellants as they then become, of course, applied for an order costs against the council on unreasonable behaviour. So the inspector carefully considered this and recognised that there were two criteria and felt that the reason for refusal that had been issued on the decision notice based upon the committee's decision was complete, precise and relevant to the application. And the inspector went on to say that the statement of case, you know, demonstrated the council believed that alternative public house provision, in the committee's opinion, did not include desirable social environment for protected groups, and that the issue of safety was really important. So the inspector felt that the grounds that the council had put forward were clear, they weren't vague or generalised, and the inspector on a couple of occasions said that the council's case, which is important, the council's case is a sound one at appeal, but also that it was substantiated by a high number of representations outlining the issues about the alternative provision. And therefore the inspector found that the council had not acted unreasonably, and therefore costs were not awarded against the council. So, which I think is whilst the outcome of the appeal itself will be disappointing, the inspector taking the view and explaining their reasoning about that costs should not be awarded against the council was a positive aspect of the outcome of that appeal. So that was my kind of main update this time around, Chair, on the appeals. Happy to take any questions on that or any other cases.
Lovely, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions about that or any comments that they'd like to make? No? Okay, great. Then in that case, are you ready to move on to enforcement?
Yes, Chair, I'll be very brief. There are no notices served since the last meeting, and I know we've had a little run of this now, but I am informed that some are now with legal for finalisation before issuing, just to demonstrate that part of the enforcement approach is to take formal action when we need to, and also having regular updates on cases that have been higher profile and subject areas that have been high profile within the council as well. And I know a number of those cases are moving towards formal action as well. So I think the sooner we see notices on this list, the better. That's clear evidence of what's happening rather than what I think is going to happen. And I think I'm fairly confident we'll see some next time around, Chair.
Okay, lovely, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions about that? No? Okay, great. In that case, what we'll do is we'll move on to the items of application themselves. What we'll do is we'll take the public forum for each item just ahead of that item's discussion. But first we have some questions. So Joe, Sergeant, if you'd like to, do you want to talk from where you are, come up to the middle? That'll be
yes,
better.
just
Yep.
go to the mic, please, yeah.
Bit sizes this, but never mind. Yeah, so I know you don't normally take questions, and I know it's not relevant to the items on the agenda, but there isn't anywhere else to go with this. So I've read your answers, and I note that the most of the decisions were made with regard to walking distance rather than viability. The walking distance, I'd like a bit more information about how the decision is made regarding the 800 metres and the 1300 metres, but also understanding how you take into account the needs of the local people in some areas who may have disabilities and may have very limited mobility, and to what extent that's taken into account.
Okay, I think the case I've coincidentally been talking about, the Windmill pub, and other more recent decisions have really been a learning experience for us all, really, about the application of that policy and some of the limitations around it. So colleagues in our policy service are looking at some supplementary guidance that we can work up and actually start using to help us assess these proposals, because you will have heard me say this many times, each case on its individual merits, and I think particularly the Windmill was a good example of that, really, because of the really specific issues around that. And so I think we would benefit from standardising what we mean by ideal walking distance and things like that, but then applying it to the local situation, about who the community groups are, what barriers are in play in that particular locality as well, rather than just saying, oh well, it's within 800 metres and therefore it's okay, because it might not be. And the inspector took the same view on that with the Windmill. So I think work is happening on this, and I think it will put us in a better place in the very near future about assessing proposals that are there to provide alternatives to public houses, and we've got a policy around that, so I think clearer guidance around that would be very welcomed.
Thank you very much, Gary. And the second supplementary question, because you had two original questions, didn't you?
I'll leave that for another time. I have got a statement though.
Go on then.
Since I think I am the next person on the agenda, so I might as well not go and sit down.
Go for it.
So the reason I'm here is partly because I've got my hat on as part of the campaign to save the Giant Gorham, which is the last pub in Lawrence Weston. And there are also several other pubs in the area, in Bristol, that have been pushed for development and for basically loss of amenity. And the problem we've got two major problems. One is that we do feel very sceptical of the viability reports that the owners of the sites produce. We think they're very subjective. They're based on trying to get a pub demolished rather than based on a genuine attempt to make a business work. In addition, there is a bit of concern about the number of applications that are still sitting in people's in-trays and don't seem to be being dealt with. We've already got one that's gone to appeal because of non-determination. And I really feel that it's very important that we find out more about why these decisions are not being made, and also people aren't being told. I just want to reiterate, as an ex-councillor, I know you guys get paid to be here. Not a lot, but you do. Us campaigners, we don't get paid anything. I have to take time out of my day to come here because it's the only way we can get our questions answered. Okay, so I just want people to be aware of the amount of time and effort it takes for ordinary people to come here and actually try and get answers to questions. So that's it really. And please read my statement and think about it when you make decisions about pubs. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're next going to move on to the first application on the agenda, which is, what's it called? It's the Fulmer Greville Elderly Persons Home. And the first statement we've got is from Councillor John Hucker, but he's unable to be here.
Just to clarify, Chair, there's some questions, written questions submitted by Mark. Apologies. Sorry, that's in relation to the other application. My apologies. I'm getting confused.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Okay, we'll move on to, as I was saying, the item. So Councillor Hucker has not been able to speak his statement today because he's quite unwell with COVID. So we've got one statement from Andrew Beard, if Andrew Beard is here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Councillors. You've got my statement, so I won't just read it. The benefits of this application: it regenerates a vacant site, delivers brownfield redevelopment, creates 20 new housing units, which improves the mix, meets individual space standards, delivers affordable housing, 100% badly needed, creates a new landscape site, delivers high quality architecture, delivers 26% CO2 reduction above the policy of 20, includes sustainable drainage, is a sustainable urban site, utilises an existing access, and it respects the neighbours with the careful siting of bungalows and separation distances. It meets all the policies and guidance. And the one thing I would highlight is very often I work for developers and they put forward a scheme and then they just try and tweak it. But in this case, I'm working for a housing department. They've done 2 thorough consultation exercises where they've made real radical changes. So the residents did make concerns about access. It's already there. There would have been care home activity. They did make concerns about the distances. Some of the houses were changed to bungalows. So there's been real change in the application. Your task today is to look at it in light of policy, not about alternatives or other schemes. And I would just support your officer's report, which goes through all the policies and concludes that it meets all the policies and guidance, and there are no statutory consultee objections. So hopefully I would like you to invite you to support and approve the scheme today for valuable, affordable housing, which this city really badly needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that was wishing to speak and has submitted a statement on this item that hasn't been called forward to speak, just in case we've missed you off? No? Okay, great. In which case, we'll move to the officer presentation. And colleagues, you will have been sent the slides earlier via your email, so you can look at it on your own screens. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As you heard, this is an application submitted by the Council's Housing Delivery Team in Stockwood for 26. This presentation will roughly take about 10 minutes. So the application site is located on the south side of Lacey Road and was formerly occupied by a large care home which was demolished in 2020. It was a single-storey building, so you can see where the objections now come from the development of the site, which is going to consist of 2-storey properties. I'll just turn your attention to the amendment sheet, just a correction in my report. There's a missing subsequent planning application in the planning history, which was submitted in 2016 following the pre-app I've listed, which was for a care home, but this was withdrawn. This was withdrawn in 2018 due to the council being unable to afford high specification costs of that type of facility, and the council were developing solutions to enable people to stay in their homes rather than provide purpose-built accommodation. And so the council decided to utilise this site to deliver housing, which is one of the key priorities for the council. So this is the site as it stands now. The new buildings proposed will cover the existing hard-standing areas. Boundary trees are to be retained. There are some trees there, as you can see, right in the middle of the site where the access is, which will have to be removed. Struggling a bit. Oh. There we go. Is that, hopefully that's better. Okay. Oh, my mouse is moving everything. So as I said, so this is a brownfield site, and the site is currently unallocated in the local plan. But it is proposed to be included in the local plan review, but just so you're aware, as I've said in the report, it carries limited weight. The local plan review estimates a capacity of 32 dwellings, but again, I repeat, that carries limited weight at this point in time. The site is located about 600 metres from local centre on Stockwood Road, which is to the east of this site, and there are also bus routes. So we consider this site to be a highly sustainable location. Show some visuals of the development. It's 26 dwellings are proposed, a mix of bungalows and 2-storey buildings, which will consist of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom properties. You can see their parking is proposed. It's 34 spaces in total. I think it's 3, which will be for blue badge holders. The scheme will consist of 16 2-bed units, 8 1-beds and 2 3-bed units. And as mentioned, it's going to be 100% affordable. The applicant has not yet specified the tenure mix, but conversations with the applicant suggest that it will mostly be social rent with a possible element of shared ownership, but this will be no more than the 23% which we sort of set out in our affordable housing practice guide. All the properties will be M4 category 2 compliance, and 2 of the large bungalows on the left side of that image will be category 3, so specifically designed for wheelchair users. In terms of the design, it's fairly standard two-storey properties with brick walls and pitch roofs. Detailing will be controlled by condition. Moving on to the objection, the main issues, there are 44 objections. I think there was 41 on the PDF I sent you, but that's risen to 44. The main issues raised were the impact on neighbouring amenity, the site not being appropriate for social housing, noise from traffic, additional dwellings, highway safety issues in terms of vehicle access to the site, insufficient parking, and ecological impact and removal of trees. Just going on to the impact on neighbouring properties, I've included a snippet of the shadow study, which is within the design and access statement, which covers the months of March, June, September and December. This image here is for September and December, which should show the worst extent of overshadowing. And there will be some additional shadowing cast, mainly when the sun's at its lowest point during the winter months. That's mainly going to be cast by the existing boundaries. There will be some slight overshadowing from the tops of the houses nearest along Lacey Road here. But again, it's the level of overshadowing caused. It won't be created all year round. So we've considered the impact to be acceptable. Just show you the existing site and the relationship. As you can see, the boundary trees there provide quite useful screening, and they will be retained. In terms of overlooking, I've tried to sort of show you what the distances will be. In terms of the distance to the Chestnut Close properties to the south and Pine Close to the east, the minimum distances from window to windows will be 20 metres. There are some balconies proposed on the blocks of flats, which will be 16 metres from neighbouring properties, but they will have screening to remove any direct overlooking. And in terms of the relationship with Ladman Road, the minimum distances there, window to windows, are 21 metres. So we do not consider that would be unacceptable overlooking. Moving on to highway safety, no objections have been raised by the highway officers. The level of traffic created would not be significant and have a minimal impact on the existing highway network. So the transport statement advises there will be an increase of 37 two-way trips compared to the previous use of the site as a care home. At peak time, that's about 12 to 13 trips at peak time. In terms of the issue about refuse vehicle access, which was raised by a number of third parties, the applicant has revised the sweat path analysis, which you can see there on this image, which shows that an 11.4 metre vehicle, both entering and manoeuvring within the site, will be able to do that successfully. Highway officers have advised that refuse trucks would have access to former buildings on the site, and there's been no record of incident or issues raised. Given the frequency of collections once a week, no objections are raised by the highway officers. The applicant, as I've mentioned, proposes 35 parking bays, so in terms of the level of parking proposed, that's above 1-for-1 parking. So it would be difficult to argue that development does not provide a satisfactory level of parking, particularly as we consider it's located in a sustainable location. Just to briefly cover the other issues raised. In terms of the loss of trees on site, to make way for the development, 19 trees will be removed. 16 of those will be category C, and 3 of those will be category B. There's a further 9 trees that their tree consultant advises should be removed because they're in poor condition, and they were considered not to survive for 10 years, and they're also recommended for removal. As compensation, the landscaping scheme, which I've included on that side top right, can't really see in detail, but 21 new trees will be proposed on site, and there'll be a contribution for 8 trees off site to comply with the Bristol tree replacement standards. And in terms of biodiversity metric, there'll be a positive score on this site. The only loss was the removal of some sort of landscaped gardens that existed with the care home. The main landscape feature, which is retained on the site, the boundary trees, ensures that there'll be a positive score. And in terms of sustainability, the scheme will include ground source heat pumps, which is compliant with the heat hierarchy policy of the Bristol local plan, and the incorporation of the heat pumps reduces the residual energy use of development beyond the minimum 20% required by BCS 14. So to conclude, officers consider that the principle of 26 new affordable homes on a brownfield site is fully supported by policy and will make an important contribution to the housing stock in the city. While it's not a particularly high density, the scheme achieves a satisfactory density of development within the existing constraints, with an acceptable impact on neighbours, ecology and trees. So a slight tweak to the recommendation. We've just received a memorandums of understanding to secure off-site highway works, trees and fire hydrants. So we'll just need to review that. So we should be able to issue if members support the scheme. So we recommend an approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You did well against the noise background. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Did everybody hear that sufficiently as well? Okay, Leslie?
There has been a lot of complaints about the problems with the highway safety from various people. And I know some work has been done on that, but there is, and presumably the double yellow lines are going to go the length of the, for the length of Lacey Road until it gets to the entrance. And it will obviously do a little bit, a little bit on the other side, but how far down is that other side going to go? And are there arrangements for a signage, one for hidden entrance and the other for on the way out, warning of the possible hazards ahead?
It's the middle button.
Sorry, it's my first time. So I'm Pip Harrison, the new Transport Development Manager. I didn't do the assessment of this, but I reviewed the assessment done by my team. And the process that we use with road safety is that we build the opportunity into the section 278 that before we finish signing that off, we will have reviewed and done a safety audit to make sure the finished product is safe. But the recommendations are the fair ask of a development of this size. But we do keep monitoring it throughout. So if you are local and you have concerns, you can always let us know that those concerns are bothering you, and we can introduce more flexibility with what we end up finally certifying as safe. I hope that helps.
Have the residents been told that they can register their disquiet on the safety of the road?
Well, the process is that notices have to go up when they're making the changes. So anything impacting on the highway has to have a notice that local people can see. So I think that's our normal process. But because you've drawn this to my attention, I'll make sure that we're absolutely clear, and maybe we do a leaflet drop in the area before we do the works. Hopefully that will put your mind at rest.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. In a minute, I'm going to take Lorraine first and then Fabian, but I just wanted to get Gary or yourself to clarify a question that was asked in the public forum questions on page 20 by I can't missed who it was. It's why on the last day of the last committee meeting, because I know it was withdrawn, 3 documents were uploaded to the planning portal. And so the question is, it means that there was no time to digest new information. If you could just clarify why that is. It's page number 20, and it's statement number, you got it, number 4. It's a final statement, yeah. Just for clarity, it would be quite good to answer.
There were documents uploaded. There were minor changes to the site layout. A fence had been moved following police comments about sort of hiding an area that people could hide. So it was a minor alteration which officers didn't consider would require further consultation. So that's why it was uploaded at that point in time. But no further consultation was deemed to be necessary because it was such a small little change.
Okay. And that was on the day, on the actual last day of it was on the day, wasn't it, of the committee?
I believe, that's right.
Okay. Can we just get it noted to try to not do that, because it kind of adds confusion for residents. That kind of, it'd be better for clarity if we try to not do that. Okay, fab, thank you. If we move to Lorraine's question and then Fabian, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify why the trees needs to be removed, just based upon how the trees currently sit and why it's felt necessary to remove them, just because it doesn't seem to make that much sense, to be fair.
In reference to trees, do you mean the trees here?
Yeah.
It's because the site access, if you can see. Okay, so if does that sort of help? So there's a group of trees at the moment.
So you're not moving all of them?
So they're supposed to be removed because they'll be right in the middle of the access road. Does that?
So you're not removing all of the trees?
No, the boundary trees.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's why I was.
The boundary trees are to be, those large boundary trees are to be retained.
Okay.
It's just those ones. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I meant. The ones in the middle.
Are you able to point on the slide as to which ones?
Oh, it's not. Oh, there you go. That's weird. It's not picking up. It's because the access road. So can you see? So I'm going to have to flick between the two, but see that road carries on straight through the site. So as you can see, we wouldn't be able to do that if you kept those trees. But the boundary trees remain.
Lovely, thank you. Fabian?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned 2 categories of presumably accessible homes, because you said one of the categories was fully accessible, wheelchair accessible bungalows. Could you just, for the sake of everyone, explain what the categories are and what they mean?
I'm not an expert on the categories, but my understanding is the category, I'm going to get mixed up now, category 3 is fully designed for wheelchair users, and category 2 is adaptable. So you can make alterations to them to make them, but I don't, the full wheelchair compliant is the category 3, not 2.
Okay, Andrew and then Marley.
Thanks, Chair. I've come with a list of questions as usual. First thing is, am I right in saying that since this paper was published for the previous meeting, although we didn't discuss it, there have been no changes to the document itself?
Do you mean the plans? No changes to the actual plans? The actual report?
To the report?
No.
Yeah, okay.
No. It's just, I've put anything I added, it was on the amendment sheet.
Thanks for that. There were some slight formatting changes that initially threw me, but that was the conclusion I came to.
Apologies, I think our administration team helps with the formatting. Might be something different.
So, the questions I had, the flood risk manager initially objected to it, but then there's a sentence that says that because they've updated their drainage strategy, they feel the updates are acceptable. So the flood risk manager has withdrawn their objection. Is that right?
Essentially, there were discussions during the application of improving their drainage scheme, but that wasn't provided with the applicant, which is quite unfortunate, really. So ultimately, the flood risk manager advised we could condition it. So there's on the amendment sheet, I forgot to put a SUDS condition. That SUDS condition will cover the drainage issues.
Okay, thank you. There's a comment about the need for 3-bed units and a reference to 844 applicants. Is that over what area are those applicants determined? Is that Stockwood Ward? Is it South Bristol? Is it?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, but it's demonstrating a need. Is a point?
Yes, but yeah, this scheme, the application was submitted because supposedly there's a need in the area for 1 and 2 bedroom units. So that's what the council have put forward.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. There's a line under highway safety that says an analysis of recorded accidents for the 5-year period 2016 to 2020 indicates that none has taken place adjacent to the site entrance. Am I correct in saying, though, that over that period the site has been closed? Because my understanding was
that's correct. I think it has been since 2012, possibly. Yeah. Or yeah.
So, although there may have been no incidents over that period at that junction, that's probably largely down to the fact there's been very little use to be made of that junction. Okay, thanks. I think those. Oh no, one more question. Is there any provision for car charging points in the car parking?
There'll be a condition to cover that. And I've been advised 20% is normally what we look for.
Thank you.
Okay, I think ready for Marley now.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about the access to the site. Am I right in seeing that there's only one route of vehicle access to the site, which is from that existing route? Is that appropriate for a development of this size to have a single access road? And also, I saw in the crime reduction point there was a mention of a gateway that gives re-access to the 4 properties. Is that property an access route from within the development, or are there any other routes to access these housings, this housing as a pedestrian from outside it without using that entrance?
There's no other. The only entrance is from the main road, which you can see. Yeah, you can see on this slide. This is this is recently it's been blocked up. That is the existing access. It's about 5 metres wide, that access road, which is fairly typical for road widths in Stockwood. They're quite narrow roads, actually, just going around there. Listen.
Good, great. Any more questions, or would you like to move on to statements? Okay, give me some opinions and statements then. Anybody? Fabian.
Yeah, thanks. I think, this is a development that, clearly meets a need. We have a major problem with housing in the city. Yes, it'd be ideal if there was an entrance, a throughway, but there's other schemes we've allowed where there's one entrance on and off the site. It's a sensible use for brownfield site. Building on brownfield means we don't have to build on greenfield so much. It meets a need. It includes accessible housing. It's a similar, from what I can see, it's a similar density to the properties around it. So I think this is an entirely reasonable proposal, and we desperately need social housing and affordable housing, and this will meet a need in house people, and it provides adequate parking. I think if there's things like charging points and stuff like that that we're concerned about, we can always add those to the conditions. But I think this is a wholly reasonable scheme, and I will be supporting it.
Andrew?
I too am minded to support, but I do have reservations about the narrowness and length, the nature of that entrance way to the site. But other than that, I am minded to support.
Great. I mean, I think we've all seen, I'll take your hand in a second, we've sort of had a lot of quite small flats and those sorts of developments that have caused us to despair, haven't we, in the last year. So it's quite nice to see something that's got gardens and adequate homes, and there will be nice homes for families that need them, which is really nice and positive to see, and also accessible, which is what we need a lot more of as well in the city. So I think on balance, notwithstanding some of the issues raised, I too am minded to support it. Lorraine?
Yeah, just a very quick point actually. I agree with what you said, Councillor Townsend, and Stafford Townsend, I beg your pardon. I just wanted to reiterate that issue we're having across the city in regards to access to GP surgeries, access to other types of amenities, which is under pressure at the moment as well. So just to sort of recognise that it's had another layer, but you know, in principle, it's okay. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything else to say, or shall we move to a vote?
I mean, do the conditions cover the double yellows? Because I think it might give some people peace of mind if we condition that there's double yellows on both sides of the access road, all the way.
We have a detailed design condition to go there to make sure there's a safe pedestrian area in the design. So sometimes, because the space is limited, we have to do it as shared use, but because it's off-road, we can design it with the developer that there is material differentiation for the safe pedestrian movement. So that's part of what we do in our team. We make sure that that space will be there. We also suggest that the welcome packs that go into everybody's house include information about how to consider the space, your safe movement tips and things like that.
I think what we need to do, though, is make sure that nobody parks vehicles in until you actually get to the new development. We need to make sure that sort of access road that was the access to the... We need to make sure that that bit is just, before we get to the housing, that nobody can park down that road and block it.
We can consider partial adoption to be able to put in double yellow lines. That's part of the work we would do when we observe before we certify it. It's definitely possible, and there's no need to change anything in the decision at the moment because that's part of our safety process.
Okay, that'll do.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Guy, I saw your hand as well.
Similar reservations, I think, to Councillor Brown. Some concerns around that. I appreciate the Transport Department will take a good look at this and work it out with the developer before it becomes adopted or developed. But some concerns there, and also, whilst I very much do appreciate the need for affordable and social housing in the city, both the ward councillors have made the point that what Stockwood has in excess is 3-bedroom properties. What it has a shortage of is 1- and 2-bedroom properties, and what this seems to deliver is a majority of 3-bedroom properties and a minority of 1- and 2-bedroom properties. Which is that wrong?
It's 62% 2 beds. What did I say? It's the majority is only 2 3-beds.
Apologies, I'm cross-referencing as fast as I can between a few different documents here.
But also as well, just as additional clarification, are those, the large quantity of 3-bedroom houses, are they 3-bedroom houses in private ownership or social housing ownership? Because we need more social housing 3-bedroom than 2-bedroom properties, not necessarily more private ones that people can't afford. So what...
It's not been finalised yet, exactly. There'll be social rent and shared ownership, but that's not been finalised yet. So if there's any things that you would like to consider, we could take that when it's finalised.
Yeah, what is it looking like at the moment?
I don't have that level of detail at the moment, yeah.
I think this provides, it's clearly, there's a shortage of 2 and 1 bed social housing. This provides them. It does provide a couple of 3 beds. We don't want to make the sort of perfect the enemy of the good. This will house people who aren't being housed at the moment, and it will take a little bit of pressure off a very, very, very long housing waiting list. So I think, I think we should just go ahead with this. We should support this anyway because it's a good scheme. It gives people gardens, real green space. It preserves all the boundary trees. It's accessible. It's near a local centre. It's near public transport. So it's a very, very sustainable brownfield site, providing something that people need. And I just think, we should just go ahead, and I'd like to move the officer recommendation.
Before we do that, Guy, have you finished saying what you wanted to say?
I'm reasonably sure, Chair, that members of the committee are minded by a reasonable majority to vote in favour of this, but I would just like to flag that I do think we need to be very, very clear when we're supporting something because it's social housing or because it's affordable housing, that it is actually meeting the needs of the local community there. I hate the idea that we would just be passing things because of a target that doesn't necessarily actually meet the objectives that kind of development should be. And I do think it's a question that's worth asking, and it is the kind of thing I would really like to know firmly before I make a decision on something like this. As I say, I think with this one, it's going through anyway, but I think it's an important point to make.
Okay, then before we do move to a vote, are you able to give us any kind of idea of how that would lie?
No, sorry, no, I don't.
Gary?
I think just know from the work that we do with the housing delivery team, who are effectively the applicants here, they do local engagement as an important part of their work, but essentially they are looking across the whole city to deal with the whole city's needs, really. And some of that will be in flatted accommodation, some of it will be parts of private development that either the council purchases off a developer or a registered provider housing association purchases, and then sometimes you get sites like this that are brownfield and are suitable for housing. So I think it's more that kind of citywide focus on meeting the need, but I know there is local engagement that takes place, but certainly I think the starting point is that citywide perspective.
Okay, thank you. I would like go on the one from Lorraine, and then I'd like us to move to a vote, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to get a point of clarification, that was all, Chair. How can we sort of defer, not because we're not necessarily going, no, this is a point of clarification, Councillor, let me just finish, because that's why I'm asking the question, so that we get some clarification around what Councillor Poultney was saying about suddenly we end up with 4-bedroom houses that's not needed. I just wanted some clarification from, I can't see his name because I'm as blind as a bat. I don't know how it works, that's why I'm asking the question. I'm not asking for a deferral.
I can explain.
Go on then.
Basically, what's put before us is what has to be built. So if this is given permission, they can't just change it without coming back to us. If they suddenly decide, actually, we don't want to do this, we want to stick a block of flats that's 40 stories high up on here instead, they have to bring it back to committee as a new application. So if we say this development is what we're granting, that's what goes up. And revisions have to come back to us.
Yes, Chair. To clarify, the proposal's a very specific one. So it's 26 dwellings, mix of bungalows, 2-storey buildings, and so any deviation from this would need a new planning application. So it isn't just a generic approval for housing that they're seeking here. So The proposal before you now is of the 26, 16 are 2-bed units, which is 62%. 8 of them are 1-bed units, which is 31%. And 2 of them are 3-bed units, which is 7%. And our professional opinion, that's a pretty good mix, really. And I think, as the chair said, it's nice to see a housing scheme for once, rather than a flatted scheme, because of the locality and the way that this site can be developed. But it's certainly that specific proposal you're being asked to decide upon today.
I'd add to that as well, actually, as a inner city ward councillor, when I'm talking to developers and we're looking at flats, and it's all 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom flats, it's because housing providers don't want to put families in flats. They want them to be in houses with gardens for good, understandable reason. But we also need to then build 3-bedroom houses with gardens in order for them to go to. At the moment, that's not what we don't have enough easily accessible space to do that, which is one of the reasons why I'm quite enthusiastic about this one, because I know that even though it's not in my ward, there's certainly the sorts of places that a lot of the occupying families in my ward would adore to live in. So I'm going to move us to a vote for officer recommendation, which is to approve. And I'm going to do a roll call. And I'm going to start over there with Andrew.
4.
Fabian.
4.
Katia.
4.
Marley.
4.
Leslie.
4.
Lorraine.
4.
Guy.
4.
And myself is also 4, so that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll take a brief 5-minute break so that people can use the toilet and everybody can show where they need to be. So we'll restart just after 3 o'clock. Thank you very much. hello, welcome back. Okay, so we have the public conveyances on the Circular Road as our next item. And we have some questions from Mark Ashdown, who's chair of the Bristol Tree Forum. If you'd like to step up and off you go.
Thank you, Chair. I think the answer to question one, my question initially was a procedure one, to establish whether the committee deciding this matter today has the same constitution as the committee that looked at this matter on the 6th of April when you'll recall the committee decided to defer its decision to reject the application on the basis that the officer would return with the same answers. So my question is, are there any concerns that this committee has about addressing this matter? Very much, I suppose, relates to whether or not you're going to treat this today as an ab initio decision, or whether you're actually going to deal with the deferral on the basis of a vote to reject the application. I did write to you about what I see as an error in the records of the minutes, but I've not had any response to that. So that my second question would be, have you seen that? What's your decision on that?
Yep, you answer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The second question will be addressed by the case officer in his presentation, because we'll start from where we are in terms of the resolution that was made on this matter last time by the committee. In response to, is the committee the same? Well, it isn't, and that's quite typical of any committee, really, that new members will join, or there may have been subs last time, or there might be subs the second time around. But that's all right and proper, because the committee is a collective body, and it's important to clarify that the only thing that happened last time around was that the committee deferred the application. It kind of expressed that it was minded to refuse and raised a number of issues. And as part of that, officers were then tasked with providing further information on those issues, and also to supply any reasons for refusal that we feel, in our opinion, could be used to refuse the application, if that's what members today are still minded to do. So that, we followed that kind of that instruction in that way. Ultimately, though, the committee it's important to, and for committee members to hear this as well, you're considering the whole application, all the issues still. And if you're sitting on the committee, you weren't here last time, as with any application, really, you need to be content that you have all the information that you feel you need to make the decision that you intend to make, really. And so that's all right and proper. So it's not that the committee made a partial decision last time, and this is kind of like finishing that off. The only thing that happened last time was that the application was deferred, and so the committee are back now considering, yes, the same proposal, but based upon the previous report and the update report as well. And it's open to the committee to make whatever decision it sees fit, really, within reasonableness. And so to that end, the presentation will cover all the background as well for those purposes, just so that members have all that information.
But it is correct to say that we deferred it pending reasons to reject it.
So yes, it was in the light of it's a matter of record, isn't it? Of course, that the recommendation was moved, but not carried last time around. So that's a matter of records, and so the motion that was carried was to defer the application, and so but obviously in the background that members were minded to refuse the application and had concerns on a number of issues.
Thank you. Do you have any more supplementary questions? Go on then.
Just to check, question for Gary, really, through you, Chair. We do, at this point, okay, so it's deferred and it's coming back and we're going to get the whole story told us again, so do it. So we do have a free hand to either approve, reject, or whatever, as we see fit, based on what's put up before us now, plus the public forum, of course.
That's correct, yes. So it's important that your decision is not fettered in any way whenever you consider a planning application. And so we've been in this situation before where an application has been deferred, and sometimes the application has gone on to be refused, and sometimes it's gone on to be approved. And that's the process, really, and that ultimately you're a committee open to make the decision that you want to make.
But also to clarify, because one of the things that I do note on the first slide that's here is that it points out that it's a resubmission of another planning application that was approved, but it's a separate application to that, isn't it? So that's not, they are two separate applications, the one that was previously approved and this one here.
Oh yes, sorry, Chair. But to be clear, I meant that this is a case where it has been deferred, so you're hearing about the application for the second time. So those previous cases were in exactly the same situation. I wasn't talking about historical permissions from a few years ago.
Yep. And to be really clear, without getting too far down into the debate of this already, but when we're considering an application, it is the application in front of us, which is, for sake of, it's the top number application. The bottom application number that's on this slide, which was previously passed, is a separate application, and whether or not it failed, passed or not, should have no material consideration. It's not a material planning consideration, is it?
I have to say that any previous application on the site has to be seen to be material. You have to take that into account, but it's up to you as individual members what weight that you give to it, as long as you have considered it.
Okay. I mean, I would like the record to note that I find the reference on that first slide to the previously passed application quite leading and slightly inappropriate. Yeah, thank you. Do you have any more supplementary questions?
Safe to add that the 2018...
Can you speak into the mic as well there, because we can't quite hear you?
The 2018 application did not in any way, shape or form deal with biodiversity net gain. It wasn't presented. My third question, question number 3 really asked, is there going to be a further consultation? Only yesterday afternoon, the first time I saw it, was the alternative off-site location identified. And I'm surprised that the answer suggests that there need be no consultation over that new site, because given its location, and I recall because we're the very body with FODAG and with Bristol Nats, who actually had the trees planted there at about the end of 2019, and we were required to go for a consultation and get approval before the Downs Committee, and which we in due course did. And I know that the neighbours, the houses nearby, took a very lively interest in that, and they had some observations to make and had to be dealt with. So I'm very surprised if a new site's identified, which has never been identified before, that this committee feels, or the planning officers feel, that there's no need to have a further consultation on the matter. Do you wish to comment on that, please?
Yeah, it is recognised it was unfortunate that that information only came in recently, and it was kind of made available and published on the website as soon as we had that. I think our position still remains, and I'll come on to actually show this plan in the presentation and the slides that I have. I think our position still is that we feel that a condition would still be required in any event to actually ensure that we can give kind of full and proper consideration to the proposed location of any planting, and also to deal with the issues of the species mix of that as well. So yeah, we still see that as providing some indication as to where some additional planting could go, but that a condition would still be required in any event.
biodiversity net gain calculation does not achieve positive biodiversity net gain. It's a fact, even on the applicant's figures, if I may say so. But that's the end of my questions. Do you want me to move on to a statement, or will I be called in due course? I'm not first in the list, and I'm happy to wait.
I'll call you up when it's time. Thank you. Okay, we will. Thank you very much for those answers. We'll now move on to statements. The first one I have is Robert Westlake, or Friends of the Downs and Avon Gorge, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, for this opportunity to address the panel. I speak today in support of the proposal, and I am, as you said, Robert Westlake, and I am the chairman of the Friends of the Downs and Avon Gorge. And it's our view it's essential that at least the toilet block is replaced by something that is fit for purpose. I believe the Downs Committee has made a worthy application. It provides for replacement toilets, a vital education hub, and a cafe, and in so doing supports the preservation of nature on the Downs. And this was a clear desire of respondents to the recent Downs survey. And in the current financial climate, it is essential that the Downs generate some income. And this proposal is predicted to generate at least 10% of the current running costs of the Downs through the rent that will be charged. It is our firm belief that the current facility is no longer a viable option and will soon, through necessity, be closed, leaving nothing for older citizens, our school groups, or those with medical conditions.
Thank you very much. Can you draw your remarks to a close, please?
We note that most of the objections come from near neighbours and would respectfully remind the panel that the Downs are for all our citizens, not just those that are lucky enough to live nearby. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I forgot to explain to you how the traffic light system works. When you have a minute, it turns to green when you start, it goes to amber at 30 seconds, and then red when you're out of time. Next up, we have Ben Skews, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I am responsible for the day-to-day grounds and infrastructure management, including buildings of Clifton and Durham Downs. This work is carried out by Bristol City Council Parks Department on behalf of the Downs Committee. It is my strong opinion that a toilet facility is essential in this area, given the very high footfall nature of the site. The current toilet block at Seawalls is very old, and as such is becoming increasingly problematic to keep open. The building has become very close now to being not fit for purpose. Despite the continued best efforts of maintenance people and the cleaners, the amount of time that the toilets are out of use due to maintenance issues relating to the age of the facility goes up and up. Concurrently, the costs associated with keeping the facility functioning as required go up and up. If the addition of a cafe results in having upgraded toilet facilities in one of the Downs' most busy areas, then that would represent a significant improvement to the situation that Downs users at Seawalls currently have. I am fearful that we are close now to a situation whereby the current block becomes unserviceable and the toilets have to be closed permanently.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Owen Dow of the Downs Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon all. When this was first proposed, the members of the League, its committee, clubs, players were delighted at the prospect of a second cafe with toilet facilities being available, especially as this would include information and education facility. At our recent AGM, the matter was raised by the club as inquiring as to the progress, and I was asked to continue to provide the League's full support for the proposals. With many of our matches being played a long way from the current facilities, this would provide a far better experience for those attending the matches, grandparents, parents, children, etc. Each Saturday we are asked on a regular basis by visitors to the Downs, is this the only cafe available? Our grandson is playing on pitch 24 near the seawall. Can we obtain refreshments near there? Can we use the changing room facilities? Requests come from joggers, cyclists, parents with young children, table tennis players, as well as associated with football. Many of you might not know the state of the toilets in the changing rooms.
Can you start to bring your comments to a close, please?
Sorry?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Okay. The Downs is a wonderful venue, and the proposed refurbishment and change of use of the current conveniences would greatly enhance the area.
Thank you very much. Okay, then Mark Ashdown, please.
I've already addressed this committee previously. Thank you, Chair. It's amazing that it's taken 3 months for the applicant finally to produce an off-site site. It happens to be, as I've said, where we planted trees 2.5 years ago. What's surprising is that it was only delivered yesterday afternoon, so there's no chance to comment on it. I'm limited 1 minute, which I think is perhaps unfair given the circumstances. No evidence is produced by ecologists, no recast biodiversity net gain calculation has been presented, nor has the Nature Conservation Officer of the Council commented on it, nor have we been able to comment on it. Whatever the habitat value of that site is, nobody knows. We're told third-hand evidence is really not sufficient. What also concerns me is that the plan produced perpetuates the misdirection, I have to put it as high as that has been offered throughout this application as to the true site of the old conveniences. You look at the location and block plan, that shows the true site. Every other plan shows the footprint of that building moved to the north. I've challenged this a number of times, and this committee has not addressed it, nor have any officers addressed it. I think that's deeply concerning. The latest addendum gives grounds for refusing this application on the basis of biodiversity net gain loss, and I would recommend and commend that condition or that decision, that reason should be taken and adopted by the committee.
Thank you very much. Okay, Stephen Small, please.
He's given his apologies.
Yes, okay.
Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Stephanie French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to talk to the committee. I've listened to what Mr. Collins has said, but I still intend to read my submission because I can't agree with him. I'm concerned about due process here. I saw this application being refused, and the online presentation is still visible online from YouTube, and I've looked at it several times over the last few days, and I still see the application being refused. So that raises the question, when is a decision not a decision? And my own answer for that, rather cynically, is that apparently it's not a decision when the Downs Committee, which is an organ of the Council, doesn't like the answer it got the first time. Today is a rerun of this application in order to try and get it through, which isn't what the DCB asked for on the 6th of April. The same thing happened in November 2020, when the Downs Committee submitted clandestine evidence to an inspector acting on behalf of the Secretary of State, because another inspector had, exactly a year earlier, refused the application, citing very similar issues of concern as this committee expressed
Thank you very much.
in April this year. So none of this is really very democratic.
Thank you. Okay, then I have a statement from Susan Carter to be spoken by Mark Ashdown, please.
Susan Carter sets out how reasons for refusal might be presented robustly. She explains the proposed development cannot be considered ancillary. It is neither necessary nor subservient, but a destination in its own right. Destination in its own right. Further, the committee is not bound by the earlier permission, 2018-2019 decision. The planning decisions are a question of judgment. Different decision makers make different views. Thank you. I've got another statement to make from the Open Spaces Society.
You do. You might as well just stay there for a second, and I'll announce it as Kate Ashbrook's statement as spoken by Mark. Thank you.
The Open Spaces Society repeat their early objections and again describe building a cafe to provide a few toilets as ludicrous. They point out that the committee cannot impose a condition involving the enclosure of land. They regard only the proposed toilets as ancillary, though the proposals are not acceptable, whether ancillary or not. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, Chris Goodsall, please.
So just some reminders. I think the fact that this was approved previously is relevant, and the fact that it has since then been approved by the Secretary of State is also relevant. All technical issues have been addressed in consultation with the relevant stakeholders, and that will be ongoing. The roof is to be planted with plants native to the gorge, and including this total area, the total area planted on site has increased by 85 square metres. Our consultants, Betts Ecology, have identified potential means to increase biodiversity over a wider site, and their proposals have been accepted by the Council's ecologist. The biodiversity net gain metric is a complicated piece of software requiring training. I ask the committee not to reject expert understanding in favour of unverified opinion from unqualified members of the public. Thank you.
Wendy Watson, please.
Thank you. I apologise. I am an uninformed member of the public, but I am passionate about this proposal, and I feel very strongly that it should go ahead. To refurbish the existing toilet block, which I understand is a possibility, would not help or to stop the drug-related goings-on in the evenings, and would therefore be a serious waste of money. I believe a good, well-run cafe would be an excellent source of income, comprising basic rent plus turnover-dependent rent, important that. This would help to recover some of the income lost from the zoo parking, rather than the taxpayer covering the shortfall. Surely a vote winner. The education centre would go a long way to teaching our children and grandchildren to respect, appreciate and love the Downs as much as I do. I walked up there last evening because of coming here today, and what I saw confirmed my statement that in the email you've already seen. I saw the grotty toilet block, the camper van parked for the night, and of course the ubiquitous litter. It needs to change, and I really do hope with a passion that you will support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Katie Grant, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm a member of the Downs Committee, a Green Party councillor in neighbouring ward of Clifton. And I'm here just to say I do appreciate there may be some procedural difficulties that are legitimate, but really I'm here just to speak briefly about the outcome, what this cafe could mean. Many others have said it. I think that, I was there yesterday with the Downs Committee. The existing toilet block is pretty disgraceful, and it is perfectly clear from Ben Scuse's evidence this is costing the council money, and it's just something that's not going to improve by itself. A cafe will take care of that. And I don't really understand why there's this sense that a cafe is a sort of site of moral torpor, and a difficulty. I think, frankly, the major issues around littering and a lot of the things the Downs faces with sort of nighttime activities and all the rest will not be remotely made worse by a cafe, quite the opposite. The most important thing is I think the education and outreach component of this cafe is undeniable. It will be something of great significance for school groups, for the elderly, for disabled visitors, and hopefully, potentially, to reduce car use and parking up on the Downs if there are more facilities for those visiting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mandy Levers, please.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I'm the Education Manager for the Avon Gorge and Downs Wildlife Project, and I'm really delighted to support this application. Our small team has been running a highly respected education and community engagement programme on this site since 2001. The nature of the site is that there are two main areas where we deliver our activities, driven by different wildlife and habitats, and there's two different locations, and they're on opposite sides of the Downs, about a mile apart. It is intended that the proposed Clifton Conservation Hub in the entrance lodges of Bristol Zoo Gardens will provide facilities suitable for many elements of delivery nearby on Zoo Banks and in Clifton Down. However, without suitable facilities near Zoo Walls on the other side of the site, we won't be able to run the elements of our project delivery that need to be delivered at this location. There is more detailed in the written statement about the nature of those activities and the needs of the huge variety of audiences that we engage with, from small children to vulnerable adults. But suffice to say that the new facilities at Seawalls are essential to continuing our educational offer there. The Avon Gorge and Downs Wildlife Project education staff roles are supported financially by the Downs Committee, along with Bristol Zoological Society and others, and the fact that the building will generate an income for the Downs will help support this financial commitment. And just to say, I was out today on the Downs with 60 5- and 6-year-olds, and it's absolutely tipping down. And we were in the Seawalls area, and we really do need facilities in that area for them to be undercover and to have access to good toilets.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, is there anybody here who's submitted a statement that was expecting to speak that I haven't called out yet? No? Okay, great. With that, we'll move to the officer presentation, which again, colleagues, you've got the slides in your inbox that came with the other ones earlier. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. So members will recall that at a previous meeting of this committee on the 6th of April, a planning application was considered for the demolition of an existing public toilet block and the construction of a single-storey building which would comprise a cafe, an education booth and replacement public toilets. The report from that meeting is attached to the update report and they should be read together. The officer recommendation was to grant subject to conditions. However, at the meeting, this was not carried, and a motion to defer a decision on the application until a future meeting of the committee, pending officers reporting back with further advice and, if appropriate, reasons for refusal on the issues of biodiversity, change in footprint, the case for the education centre, and whether the development can be considered ancillary. I will present the proposals again and also provide an update on some of the additional information that has been received from the applicant following the committee meeting on the 6th of April. This information seeks to respond to some of the concerns that were raised, both in the representations received and also by members at that committee meeting. I will then go on to discuss the reconsultation that has been carried out and also the further advice on the relevant issues and also potential reasons for refusal. So just moving to the slides, this slide shows the location of the site, which is located far northwestern corner of the Downs, to the north of Circular Road and the Seawalls viewpoint. The site is located within the Downs Conservation Area, and the Sneed Park Conservation Area is located to the north. The Downs are a site of nature conservation interest, a local historic park and garden, as well as important open space. The Avon Gorge, adjacent to the west of the site, is a site of special scientific interest, as well as a special area of conservation. The adjacent building, which is known as Towerhurst, is Grade 2 listed. The existing toilet block, which can be seen in this image, was constructed in the 1950s and is in a poor state of repair. In terms of the site context, these are some further images which provide an idea of the site. The image at the top is a view across the Downs towards the site. The existing single-storey building largely blends into the trees behind the site. And then the image at the bottom of the slide shows the toilet block from the viewing point. In terms of the proposals, these are the visuals of the building when viewed from the east. As can be seen, it's single-storey in scale, appears to be of a lightweight construction with a steel frame and floor-to-ceiling glazing. The toilet block element, which is broadly central within the building, would be clad with timber. and the flat roof would include a green roof. This is the site layout plan as existing, and it should be noted that this plan has been updated following the 6th of April committee to include details regarding the existing footprints. And I appreciate that you won't be able to read that on the slide, but I'll just read out what those footprints are. So the existing toilet footprint is 43 square metres. The existing hard surfacing and footprint of the building taken together is 188 square metres. Moving on to the site layout as proposed, the proposed building would be located slightly to the south of the existing toilet block, but in a broadly similar position. This plan has also been updated to include details of the proposed footprints. And for the proposed cafe, toilets and the education booth, that would be 75 square metres. And then for the proposed hard surfacing and the building taken together, that would be 239 square metres. Here's the proposed floor plan for the building. There'll be a timber decking surrounding it, with the cafe, the tables and the chairs at one end, the toilets located centrally, and then the education booth at the other end of the building. This is a plan that was just recently received, which shows the wider site plan, showing the off-site planting. It shows a potential location for off-site planting in the form of a proposed wildflower meadow, which would be 200 square metres in area, and that would be located to the top right of this image, just roughly where the cursor is there. And the applicant advises that they've been in discussion with the Parks Department regarding this potential location. And in addition to this plan, the applicants provided further information regarding biodiversity and an updated biodiversity net gain assessment, and a copy of the note from the applicant's ecologist is attached to the update report. In terms of the reconsultation on this, a 14-day reconsultation was carried out in light of this additional information, and a further 45 objections were received. In summary, the concerns raised were similar to those which are set out in the grounds for objection in the committee report for the 6th of April meeting. And comments were also received from the ward councillors who are in support of the refusal of the application and also reiterating their previous concerns. So now turning to the further advice and, if appropriate, reasons for refusal, I will cover each of these in turn. In terms of biodiversity, we have received further comments from the Council's Nature Conservation Officer on the further information submitted by the applicant. They have identified that there is a need to update the ecology report, and they had also requested the location of the off-site planting to confirm the calculations that were in the applicant's latest submission. As we have seen, there has now been proposed a potential location for off-site planting. However, it is still considered that a condition would be required to confirm this in terms of the location and species, and also to ensure that it would be secured. So in providing further advice regarding reasons for refusal, having carried out further consultation with the Nature Conservation Officer, officers do not consider that advice regarding a reason for refusal on the grounds of biodiversity would be appropriate, as based on the information submitted and the conditions that are proposed, it is considered that this issue could be addressed. Turning to the change in the footprint, as we've seen, we've now had areas added to the plans, and the change in the footprint therefore appears to be as follows when you compare the existing building to the proposed building and footprint. So in terms of the building footprint, there appears to be an increase of 32 square metres. And then factoring in the hard surfacing, so the hard surfacing and the footprint of the building, the increase would be 51 square metres. In terms of the case for the education centre, this really remains as was previously proposed, and the booth is still designed to provide a base for the Avon Gorge and Downs Wildlife Project. This is an organisation set up to protect the wildlife interest of the Avon Gorge and the Downs, and to raise awareness and understanding about the importance of the area for people and wildlife. And it's noted that the public forum statement from the Avon Gorge and Downs Wildlife Project contains further information regarding their vision for how the centre would operate. So finally, on the question of whether the development could be considered ancillary, the Downs, as I've mentioned, is important open space. And policy DM17 states that development on part or all of an important open space will not be permitted unless the development is ancillary to the open space use. Officers acknowledged at the previous committee that the cafe could potentially be considered the least ancillary element of the uses making up the development under consideration, albeit that it needs to be considered as a whole. What constitutes an acceptable ancillary use in terms of policy DM17 is not defined in the policy. In planning terms, this is, however, normally taken to be something that is clearly linked and of a relationship that is subservient. It could therefore be open to some interpretation and a difference of view. It should, however, be noted that in granting planning permission for a similar form of development in March 2019, the local planning authority did not refuse permission on the grounds that the development would not be ancillary to the important open space and therefore conflict with policy DM17. Officers consider that there has been little change in circumstance in terms of policy or other material changes since this previous decision, which should be given significant weight. This is an application, however, which must be considered on its merits, and if members were, however, minded to refuse on this basis, a suggested reason for refusal on this ground has been set out in the update report at the end of the advice on this issue. And this reads, the proposed development on part of the Downs, which is designated as important open space, would, by reason of the uses proposed, not constitute ancillary development to the open space use and would result in the unacceptable loss of part of the open space, which would have an adverse impact on the existing highly important green infrastructure asset. And the reason then goes on to cite policy DM17, policy BCS9 and the MPPF. That concludes my presentation on the update report.
Thank you very much. Who's got some questions? Marley, you can start.
Thank you, Chair. So coming into this fresh, as I wasn't on the previous committee that considered this, my first question is about the ancillary nature of this, because I think that's crucial to sort of how we determine the application and how that relates to the floor space. So, you know, my view would be that the toilets are the most obvious ancillary sort of part of this development. You know, that's crucial for many people to visit a park and green space. Then second, it would be the education centre, and then lastly, the cafe. But the floor space, it almost seems to be working in the other order. So obviously the greatest allocation of space is to the cafe, and then only a very small amount of the space is reserved for toilet facilities, and that's actually a loss on the existing provision. I'm just sort of wondering, you know, was that inevitable because a cafe to fund the toilets had to have that amount of floor space to be profitable, but whether it would have been possible to reserve further space for additional toilet facilities?
I mean, in terms of kind of the rationale for the proposal, it's our understanding that the cafe is necessary in order to actually subsidise the toilet. So it has to be of a certain size, you know, to be viable. I think on the question of ancillary, I think really the point was in kind of looking at that in terms of the open space designation. There is a need to consider kind of the proposal like as a whole. It's not possible to kind of separate out the uses. These aren't in kind of different buildings, so it being a kind of single kind of building needs to be viewed, you know, in that way. And like I said, it's, you know, previously hasn't been refused on the grounds that it wouldn't be ancillary, but it does appear that of the issues that the committee wish for further advice on, that does appear to be an area where a difference of view or kind of interpretation kind of could be arrived at, because, as I say, it isn't actually defined, you know, within the policy.
Andrew?
Thanks. In the Bristol Tree Forum statement, there is a reference to concern about the location and block plan, suggesting that it shows the existing block in the wrong location. Do you have any comments on that at all?
Yeah, this was put to the applicant following the 6th of April meeting, and it's understood that there was a discrepancy that arose from basing the plan on an ordnance survey plan. Yeah, the applicant was invited to correct that. It is our understanding they have, yeah.
Okay, Lorraine?
Thank you, Chair. I want to clarify page 69.4, where it says that the Downs Act does not allow for commercial development, and the proposal cafe is clearly a commercial development. So that's one thing. I don't see any difference between this presentation as to the previous one. We have to take into consideration the stuff around the biodiversity which hasn't been responded to, and the footprint. So it's not really a question, is it? And the footprint is incredibly large as it was previously. So I'm curious, is there anyone that can sort of address that nothing's really changed as far as the plan?
Yeah, so even though there was a reconsultation done since the last time the committee heard this one, that was based on new information, but the actual proposals themselves are the same that you saw last time around. So there hasn't been any modification of the proposals to address those issues. It's been more about submitting further information to address those issues alongside our report as well. But the proposals as they were back in April when you last saw them.
I just wanted to ask questions about the Downs altogether. As I understand it, the entire Downs is a site of nature conservation, or is that correct? Not just certain patches of it.
Do either of you like to answer that?
I can just look into that, if that's okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yes?
So he's just looking up that for clarity.
We could come back to that, Chair, once we've got that information. Just a case of checking.
The reason is I've got a secondary question. That's the reason I wanted to know the answer for it. I have a second question about it's partially the commercial or ancillary nation of this particular cafe.
Okay, I'll ask another question then whilst they're finding the clear answer to that, which is much has been made about the sort of viability of the site being kind of hinged on the cafe. Have we been sent or been given any kind of viability report or business case to back that assertion up?
No, we haven't received any information of that nature as to viability.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any other questions whilst we're waiting? Okay, Leslie.
Question.
Can you please clarify what time the cafe and buildings, i.e. the toilets, are going to close? Because there's about 4 different versions in this report.
So the latest information regarding hours of operation that we've received is that the opening hours for the cafe will generally be 8 a.m. To 7 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Sundays. During the winter months, the cafe will close at dusk in order to limit light pollution. And the toilets will be open during these periods with free access. But
they won't be open any longer. I don't want them to be. I don't.
Yeah, when the cafe is closed, it's proposed that the toilets will be available for use on payment of a small fee using a contactless payment mechanism. All hours, as I understand it.
You are joking. You leave yourself open to all sorts of unsavoury things happening in those toilets. We had the same problem in my ward, and they had to close them and pull them down in the end. And I think that was the same in Eastville ward as well. You get cottaging in them.
No, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, because you've answered my question.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions whilst we're waiting? Kasia?
My second follow-up question to why I asked why the entire Downs is a site of nature conservation is the Downs is often used for commercial projects like fairs, festivals, music concerts, all sorts of things. And that seems to be okay on the conservation site, but then building a cafe which will actually look after its space is not okay. That's why I don't understand.
Okay, we have an answer, I believe.
On that one, because we did get involved with the zoo parking issue, which had come to DC committee probably every 3 or 4 years. And then there was the issue about whether it was permitted development in terms of temporary use, and then other processes took over, thankfully, I've got to say. We did sort of start looking at, what are the permitted uses of the Downs, and there are you can use open space, any open space for temporary uses, obviously with the landowner's permission, but for temporary uses without planning permission. I think the scrutiny over this is that it is a building and therefore it clearly does require planning permission. And sometimes when you're looking at a planning application for something and something else is happening that looks either similar or more harmful, or, then it can be a case of looking at, that's not a fair assessment of both things. But it's simply, if something needs a formal application and therefore a decision, then you have to scrutinise that using all those planning policies. If something then is permitted development under those rights under national legislation, then that type of assessment then doesn't take place. So sometimes that doesn't seem right, but it's clearly a case here that the works being proposed do require a full planning application, therefore have to be fully considered applying all those policies.
Is there something as well around the temporary nature of say concerts on the Downs, or for example, or where it should have portaloos and stages and that sort of thing, but because it's a temporary structure, it's a different issue to this, which is a permanent one that could, what's there has been there for 70 years. This could be there for 70 years as well.
That's correct. I mean, there are various definitions about what is a change of use of land and also what is a building. Use can be quite hard to pin down, but buildings are easier. So if they're literally, you can drop a temporary building onto a site and then lift it and move it, then that's not seen to be a building. But the proposal clearly is, have foundations, it'll have drainage, etc., etc. So it's clearly a building and needs the full planning permission that it's seeking.
Yeah, because one of the things that I think we spoke about or touched on last time was about replacing the toilets themselves on the same footprint, but funding it through a temporary structure, like a van or something like that type of cafe, rather than a permanent structure of cafe. So that would be a different kettle of fish all again, wouldn't it?
It would be, Chair, but again, I think the promoters of this development have come in with a particular rationale, and therefore, we've got to look at the proposal before us, really, rather than an alternative one, and decide on its merits whether it's acceptable or unacceptable.
Yes, of course. Do you want to keep on going?
Yes, I've got another question. The ice cream van that's in that place often, does it have its own electric socket while it's standing there delivering queues full of ice cream?
I honestly don't know. If it did,
because then
it would
spewing out diesel all day.
Yeah. Then something like, again, whether something like that then constitutes development requiring planning permission is another thing. It's then whether whether they've got the appropriate licensing under different legislation would be something else altogether.
Okay. Excellent. We have an answer for the earlier question.
Yeah, the map on the screen shows the extent here of the SNCI. I'll just zoom in slightly. So in terms of the water tower, that's just over here. That's Stoke Road.
So could you clarify whether the proposal site is in or outside of it?
So the site is within. So the site, if I roughly position my cursor in the approximate location.
But the water tower is also already in it, and the cafe underneath it is already in it.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Go on then, Guy.
Thanks, Chair. I have a couple of questions, actually. Find myself in a slightly difficult position here. I'm somewhat troubled by one of the comments that I thought I heard from the councillor from Frome Vale, and whatever Councillor Alexander's feelings might be about the potential for antisocial behaviour at this site. I'd like to think, I hope, that she didn't mean to cast any aspersions towards any particular community. In this city, and I'd like to give her the opportunity to withdraw or clarify her remark before I move on to that question, if that meets with the approval of the Chair.
I'm perfectly willing to confirm my remark. I have no objection to anybody doing whatever they want to do in private, but sex in a toilet is not the place where young children or anybody can walk in on them. Sorry?
If you look at the design, the proposed floor plan, each toilet is a cubicle with a locked door. So basically, once it's locked and occupied, no one else can get in. I dare say the disabled one would have an emergency pull switch, so if, say, a wheelchair user fell over and couldn't get themselves back up, they'd pull the red cord to get help. But apart from that, once the door's shut, it's occupied and it's locked until it's released and the person leaves.
I think the wider problem is that the term cottaging, which is a stereotypically...
And I have a problem with the comment too. I found that my immediate thought was that was homophobic.
Yeah, I just to add clarification for Leslie, I think the issue is it's a stereotyping of homosexual behaviour that is harmful to our LGBTQI population, and we shouldn't be promoting it in this chamber. And that's what I believe Guy was requesting, that you would like to either apologise for or retract.
I'm not retracting and I'm not apologising, but I'm just stating a fact.
not the answer I was hoping for, Chair, obviously, but let's continue. My concern with this application, and my recollection's fuzzy, but I think I was the one that proposed us deferring it, particularly on the basis of ancillary use, is this. The development as proposed is only really permissible if it's found to be ancillary. That's my reading of the policy. My concern is, within the scope and remit of this committee, are we able to condition it in such a way that guarantees that it will operate and continue to operate permanently as an ancillary feature to the Downs? That's to say, would it be possible for the operator to restrict access to the toilets in the future, to remove the toilets entirely? Would it be possible for Costa Coffee, say, to become the operator of this and operate it as they would any other cafe in the city? In other words, is the basis on which we might be minded to grant this guaranteed, or is it something we have to take on faith from the applicant?
I think insofar as the planning application is concerned, really, we are looking at this solely in land use terms. I think in the future, if there were a proposal to, say, kind of remove the toilets entirely, that potentially could need permission, kind of, you know, depending on what would be going in place of those toilets. So yes, whilst through the planning application we aren't able to kind of control operator, and we are solely looking at it in land use terms.
If I might be allowed one more follow-up. Looking at it solely in land use terms then, we would have to be, this committee would have to be minded, would have to be of the view that a cafe, any cafe, as applied for, would be ancillary to the Downs, irrespective of its existence as an enabling development, in a sense, disregarding the revenue stream that it would create for the toilets, for the information centre, for the continued use of the Downs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because you're being asked to consider the uses, the mix of uses being put forward. So effectively, you're suggesting whether we can guarantee that is that mix of uses rather than, yeah, you left, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, 10 years down the line, it's now just a cafe. And in my mind is all the issues around that the local authority have had about keeping lots of services open, such as public toilets, and whether a planning permission could, require that. Yeah, I'm struggling with that one. I really am. But I see Councillor Breckles wants to speak. I might give you some thinking time.
Could we? I'm thinking on the issue of sort of Costa. Brands like that need a lot of signage, so I'm sure we could put conditions in to limit the signage in order to keep the building discreet. Could we also condition the availability of the toilets to the use of the cafe and the education centre? Because that would ensure that someone couldn't say, actually, I need a bigger cafe, I want to get rid of the loos. If we actually conditioned that these toilets are to be retained as part of the development, I'm sure that we could sort of ring fence them, because obviously they're essential. I personally think the education centre is clearly going to be a bonus. I think the toilets are essential. We've already been told by an officer that the existing facilities are basically coming to the end of their useful life, so we can end up with nothing, which could mean we end up with people using the shrubbery as a toilet, because if nature calls. I think I'd like to see that deterred. But also the cafes, as I see it, mainly going to be a benefit to those who are already on the Downs anyway. no one's going to go all the way out here just to go to a cafe and then come all the way back again. But if they're going to the Downs, and people already do, because the Downs are there for the whole city. We've got Pride there up there on the 9th. We've got other events and fairs and all kinds of things. I've been to a circus up there years ago. It's routinely used for all kinds of citywide events. And I just think for those who are already out there, a cafe with loos, is a no-brainer. But I think the question I've got is, can we condition retaining the toilets to the cafe use in order to protect them? Because the whole point is we need to replace the toilets which are on their way out at the existing ones because they're at end of life. We need the cafe. The applicant says the cafe is needed to basically fund the toilets. If we condition that the toilets have to be retained while the cafe is there, that should ring fence it.
Okay, let's let Gary answer that.
Yeah, so we've had a discussion around that. I think Councillor Portney made a reference to enabling development, because that's effectively what the cafe is being put forward as. And I know, sort of going through enabling development arguments recently, that you must try and link the two. You can't end up with a situation where you don't get the development or the use that's being enabled, but you only get, or you end up with just the thing that was supposed to enable the thing that everyone wants in these kind of terms. So I think technically what we could do is put a condition on to require the continued access of those toilets and continued opening of them. Now that's making a really specific thing there as part of the development, but ultimately the applicant in this case, if they didn't want that, that might expose an issue, but they're able to appeal that should they wish, or to seek to vary it again, which is an application that would be consulted upon. But I think that extra level of control, if that's at the heart of the committee's deliberations here about, well, we're comfortable with toilets being effectively re-provided, but they're being re-provided as part of a bigger development that we're told is needed to enable toilet provision to continue on the site and an improved provision. So for those reasons, I can see that a condition like that would pass the test about it being necessary and reasonable and precise. So yeah, I think there could be a condition ensuring that the toilets are specified in the plans are provided and retained for access in the hours as specified.
Can I ask a follow-up question about the operation of the toilets? The toilets that we have now are free and just open. Yes? Yes. Okay. So then these toilets, which is a net loss of actual toilets, will they... So you've said that they're going to be a small fee to access them out of hours, which is not something I'm genuinely in favour of, because the people that most often need a public toilet out of hours are least able to afford a public toilet, even if it's only 20p. That's not something they necessarily have. But during the cafe opening hours, are the toilets going to be free, fee paying, or just for the users of the cafe?
Yeah, in terms of what the applicant's proposing, the toilets will be open when the cafe's open with free access. When the cafe's closed, the toilets will be available for use with payment of a small fee, kind of using a contactless card system. And they submit the purpose of this is to essentially deter vandalism and kind of misuse of the facilities, because the payment will be sort of notionally, you'd be able to track that to a user. And they're also proposing as well the accessible toilet will be available for use using a radar key or some other kind of similar thing. So yeah, that's their proposal for how the toilets will operate, both when the cafe's open and when it's closed.
Okay, thank you. Lorraine.
Okay, I think we've deviated slightly from the actual issue. Commercialisation of the Downs Committee, the protected environment, the biodiversity, the increase in footprint, etc., etc. We're talking about things that are kind of irrelevant to the actual plan, as far as I'm concerned. It's about changing the footprint and going from talking about toilet, talking about cafe. If we want to change the toilets because the toilets are not fit for purpose and change the toilet, the change in the footprint is completely different. And I think there was a comment about the last time about the fact that we were concerned about the residents' view. No interest in, sorry, with the residents. It's about actually not using the downs for commercial use and changing the footprint of the current toilet. So we've deviated from that. So I'm bringing us back, even if I sound a little bit biased, because I felt like I only voted a couple of weeks ago. We're talking about increasing the footprint, the impact on the biodiversity, which is well documented, as opposed to talking about toilets and what time they're going to open.
Did you have a question, or was that more of a statement? Yeah, that's okay. I mean, we can move to that, but I think as well that it is important that I hear what you're saying there, Levay, but we've got lots of different points. So it's commercialisation of the downs, it's the loss of biodiversity, is this an ancillary use or not? It's the footprint. It is about the toilets, because the very title of this application is public conveniences. It's about toilets, and yet on the plans from the architect, it's called a cafe. So it's quite clear what they consider it as and those things are all really important. They're all issues that we need to be taking into consideration. Did you want to say something else, and then I'll take Guy's hand?
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Yes, I was talking about the toilets being important, but in regards to either we change the toilet, revamp them. I'm not saying they're not important. So I'm just saying I would have a view about changing the current toilet to bring it up to date. Yeah, so I'm not discounting it, Chair. Thank you.
So Guy, then Marley, and then let's move to sort of the debate stage of life.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so sorry, and I appreciate time's dragging on, but I do want to be absolutely clear about this sense of an enabling thing. That sounds like a very good way of ensuring that the toilets will continue to be there as long as the cafe continues to be there, and that is good, and I'm great. My concern is equally, or possibly more so, about the revenue stream, in that we're putting in what is ostensibly a commercial unit on the downs, because the revenue that it generates can be used to support the downs, as in it will be ancillary to the existing use of the downs, including the toilets, including the information boards, and also, I would imagine, the general upkeep of the place. My question is, can that revenue stream be ring-fenced in any way by this committee? If they make £1 million a year, which I would appreciate is hypothetical, they would keep whatever's left over post the maintenance of the toilets and the information boards. Is that right? There's no way of saying. The only thing I'm thinking of, possibly because of the nature of the downs, is could the ownership of the cafe change? As in, if it's owned by an organisation that exists solely to maintain and promote the downs, then that would strike me as doing that already. But what I want to check is they can't sell the cafe to Costa, or in other coffee providers are available.
I think as a local planning authority, we have to limit our controls to what are controllable under land use planning. So ring fencing revenue, we can't go into that. Who ultimately operates the cafe and owns it? Again, as a planning authority, we can't go into that. Clearly, if there was gaudy advertising associated with that, that would be another thing that we would have to consider and probably reject in this very sensitive setting. So we have to focus on what do we want to control here, and I think we've arrived upon what we want to control, which is the continued provision and upgrade of the public toilets in the area. So I think the condition that I set out really would be the way to do that. I think controlling monies associated with the business, planning can't go into that at all, really.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I don't want to sort of ask too many questions, but I think this part's really important, is about the use of the toilets, and they'll be free at the times of operation when the cafe's open. Will it be made clear that they're free to the public in general, or they'll just be free to customers of the cafe? And will that be made clear? Will they be signposted as public toilets, or will they be signposted as toilets for cafe users? Because I think there's a bit of a distinction then, and that draws into sort of whether it's ancillary to supporting the Downs or whether it's part of the cafe's operation.
Well, the application has been made for the toilets to be available for use by the public, so any member of the public visiting the Downs. And I think in terms of the potential approach of kind of conditioning this that's been discussed, that could be kind of captured potentially within that as well, just to kind of reaffirm that and retain planning control over that.
I just think that would be quite important to make sure it's clear that these are public toilets provided next to a cafe and not the cafe toilets.
I'm going to ask one final question, actually. Is there going to be any increased cycle parking provision in the area for any additional footfall or cycle form to the cafe? Sorry for your panicked face then.
So yeah, just returning to the floor plan, my understanding is that there'll be cycle parking provision for staff, both involved in the cafe and the education booth, to essentially the rear of the building in this area here. In terms of for people visiting the cafe and the public, I'm just checking that we've got a condition covering this. Okay, yeah, so we have a condition requiring the implementation of the cycle parking that I've just identified. So we could also potentially explore opportunities as well for public cycle parking provision as well through conditions.
Thank you very much. Okay, so to move to the debate, who would like to kick us off with an opinion? Go on, Fabian.
Yeah, I think if my condition is added about tying the availability of the toilets to the cafe, then that makes the cafe much more ancillary, because if they decide to get rid of the toilets, they'd have to lose the cafe as well. People have made a lot of fuss about biodiversity, said a lot about, biodiversity. Yes, it does increase the footprint of the old toilets, which are, quite frankly, hideous. They replace it with what I personally think is an attractive, modest building. It'll fit in well with the area. It will mainly it'll almost entirely service people who are going to the Downs anyway, who could be from all over the city and therefore may have some time to get home before they can access toilet facilities. So having toilet facilities before heading home is a good thing. The cafe will help fund the toilets. These days with less and less government money coming in, to fund things like public toilets, ancillary uses are going to have to be thought of. Other ways are going to have to be found to fund public toilet provision. And as far as I'm concerned, this is an entirely reasonable way for the Downs Committee to come up with a way of funding a replacement block of toilets to replace some that will have to close anyway, whether this happens or whether this doesn't. We already have cafes and a water tower within the same conservation, within the same area. And I just, you look at the plans, you look at the site. Certainly if I had lived in the property facing the current toilets, I'd much rather be facing a glass building, a nice new glass building with wooden clad, with the wooden clad loos and all of that. I think the replacement is going to be far more attractive than the building that's going. So I think it's generally an improvement in the area. It's the way things are going to have to be going forward. I can't see councils being able to just sort of, drop toilets, or Downs committees or anyone else being able to just drop toilets in without any other supporting facilities to help cover them going forward for a while. We've already had, people saying how much they want this to happen. We've got the education, an education group that's going to use it, welcoming it. I think it's a good opportunity. The education facility is a great opportunity to actually take people right to the Downs and actually get to explore more of the biodiversity in the area. I just think there's so many, there's so many positives about this. I supported it last time, and I continue to support it. If anything, what I've heard today has actually firmed up my feeling on that this is a good idea and we should go ahead with it.
Thank you. So Lorraine, then Andrew, then I think I saw Guy's hand.
Okay, so we're talking about the Downs Committee using, commercialising and making profit from erecting a cafe on a protected green space. They want to increase the footprint of the building, and there is absolutely no, clearly even my fellow councillor is saying, biodiversity. I think it's outrageous. I think the last time, as my fellow councillor said, he voted one way. I am objecting to this on the basis that if the Downs Committee wants to rebuild the toilet, then rebuild the toilet with thanks. There are provisions already on the Downs, just as in other parks. I have one in my ward which was closed and another one is at the top. Then you have to walk to the provision which is available. And I think we cannot, in this climate, ignore the value of biodiversity and maintaining habitats which have been in existence way before us and should continue long after we've gone. So I myself would be objecting to this.
Andrew, then Guy.
Thanks, Chair. So I supported this at the last meeting, and I've not seen or heard anything at this meeting that has changed my view on that. And crucially, I don't think we have had fleshed out sufficient grounds for refusal on planning, sufficient planning grounds for refusal, if the committee are minded to do that. But regardless, I am minded to continue to support this scheme.
Guy.
Thanks, Chair. I did object to this scheme last time. I voted against it. And now I find myself really torn. I know we're told to come to these things with an open mind and not having made our minds up, but I can't recall ever feeling so torn at so many points during the questions and the debate. I'd like to stress, I think having more public toilets in the city is a really, really good thing. I think the education system the education boards proposed are a really, really good thing. I actually think the architect's designs are one of the nicest I've ever seen before this committee. The reason I'm torn is on this issue of the ancillary nature. As my colleague Councillor Francis says, it is at its core a commercial venture on the Downs, and I am very, very worried at the idea that at any point a developer can submit an application somewhere in the city and say, oh, it's ancillary to the local use because it's got public toilets, even if it happens to be a 3-storey McDonald's. I don't think that's a great precedent to set, and this committee is expected to act consistently from one application to the next. The thing that has made my mind up and that has changed my mind, and I think I'm probably going to vote to grant, is that in this case, we have a civic body with a degree of democratic representation to guarantee, I hope, that that is not the case over the long term, that the councillors and the members of the Downs Committee continue to ensure that that cafe is used for the public good, is used for activities ancillary to the current uses of the Downs. And on that basis, and that basis alone, I think I'm going to vote to grant. Cheers.
Marley, then Katia.
Thank you, Chair. I've obviously been coming to this as a new application, having not seen on it, and sat on the previous committee that considered this. I'd agree with what Lorraine said about, you know, the importance of biodiversity when considering on any application, but particularly one on a site like this. But on that, I think I would be more willing to defer to what the officers have recommended and said that there's not the grounds to reject this application on the grounds of biodiversity. I do see how this proposal is ancillary to the use of, you know, it being an important open space, about toilets, about an education centre, and even to a cafe. You know, I accept it will be useful to many park users to be able to purchase refreshments whilst there. And, you know, although I prefer a greater portion of the floor space, for instance, was dedicated to toilets, it's not for me to redesign the application. And I would agree with Guy and his comments about it does look quite attractive. You know, it's actually quite nice. I'm new to this committee, so I don't know the standard of the average application you have to look at, but I suspect it's quite a bit better. So I will be voting to support it.
I supported this committee as I did last time. As I said, the same. I thought the building was attractive. I agree with most of the people that have said. I'm also really hoping that the Downs Committee, with its democratic governance and stuff, will keep it as an ancillary small cafe to promote for the Downs, rather than something like, as you said, a 3-story Burger King, or was it a McDonald's? I can't remember. But the one thing I'd like to add, and I can't remember what I was going to say. The one thing I'd like to add with the education centre, I don't think you can ever have enough education on the kinds of climate and biodiversity. I'm a school teacher myself. I get around to lots of schools, and it's still quite shocking how few people take it seriously. So any more education we can have, I'm up for it. That's about all I want to say. I'm going to vote for it.
Thank you. Leslie, did you want to say anything? Nope. Okay. Just as we wait for Jeremy to return before we actually hold the vote, I will just say I think we need to be careful that we don't ever understate the importance of biodiversity. That is crucially important. And in terms of one of the questions that was raised, like what has changed now between now and the previous application, we've become more and more increasingly aware of the climate emergency. So I think that is something that has been a material change in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. And what I do note as well is that a lot of the debate about whether or not the cafe is ancillary or not, and I'm not convinced that it is based on the need of the cafe to balance to pay for the toilets, and that's not a case that I've seen made by the applicant. And I think in future I'd have liked to have seen, I think it's quite clear how everyone's going to vote, so it doesn't really matter in this particular instance, but I'd like to see in future more of that case being made as to why the cafe is important. Katja.
Sorry, I just remembered what I was going to say. I have seen very beautiful cafes in parks happen before, and one of the things that does happen together with the education centre is because the people that are there, that work there, often care about it, it actually develops more into that they do more for biodiversity in the long term. So while we're talking about the net gain, I think, of the building and what the building is going to take away or put back, or the planting of the meadow, the little meadow is going to take, we're not taking into account the people that are now going to work in that corner every day and go, oh, why don't we plant this for the butterflies? Or look how many insects we have. So it will develop, I'm hoping, because of the nature of the organisation that's bringing this forward, it will develop actually into a richer biodiversity. And the more children you educate, or people you educate to go home and not trim their bleeding edges so tightly, the better it be. So we create a beauty of messy nature, which is good for biodiversity.
Let's hope that that is the future ahead. Lorraine?
I don't know where my fellow councillors are coming from, Councillor Onchen. I have got no idea where she would have that sense that people are going to be caring about the environment when we will be losing biodiversity. I think that's really extreme kind of belief coming from somewhere, and I think we're trying to absolve our guilt by suggesting that it's okay to increase the footprint of a toilet to 3 times its width and half its length, and you should focus on that as opposed to the biodiversity aspect.
Can I come back on that?
Okay, but let's not turn this into too much of a debate at this stage.
I just want to come back on that and that'll be it. This is, relatively speaking, a small building. So it's not a huge hospital or a huge flat that you're building and destroying a huge section of biodiversity. It is relatively small. And for the very small thing that you're destroying, there are 2 ways that might, in the future, I'm hoping it will increase biodiversity. One of them is that the people that work there and take care of the place and the information officers and various different things will then add to the biodiversity because they're working there and they will plant things. And I've seen this happen in real life. It's not something I'm just making up as a dream. I actually seen this happen. And the second one is education, education, and education. We cannot have enough of it. I teach in a lot of different schools. I teach a subject where we talk about biodiversity, we talk about the food impact, we talk about all those kinds of things, and I can tell you at least a third of the children have never even heard of it, and about a third of them don't care. And that is the reality of it. Us teachers are always talking about it, how we get this. So more education you can have, the better, in my view, and that has a long-term impact around more areas outside the small footprint and the small little damage that we're going to do. It's kind of, I don't know, a plus and minus. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, I think as well, I don't think many of us will necessarily disagree with that, but I think as well we also need to make sure we take it that no patch of land is too insignificant to be cared about as well. But with that, so we don't go down a rabbit hole of debate, let's move to a vote. We'll do a roll call again, and I'll start from Leslie.
Chair, can I propose... Right, before we go anywhere, can I propose the officer's recommendation, because we haven't proposed anything, but with that condition, tying the toilet facilities to the cafe so that the toilets are protected?
Yes, I believe that was a condition that was already added in there.
I don't think it forms part of the recommendation at the moment, so I think it's...
But it does. I want it added as a condition to actually tie it on.
That's understood. So the recommendation as printed originally, plus the condition tying or ensuring the future use of the toilets
for the general public, not just and for the general public, not just cafe customers.
Absolutely, yeah.
So just to give everybody due warning, that's what we're going to do. We're going to move to a vote via roll call, and I'll start at Leslie. To follow the officer's recommendation, which is to approve. May I have a seconder, please? Your second. Well, I mean, one of you can propose it instead if you both want to. No, you interrupted me. I was proposing it, but anyway, we're going to a roll call. Leslie. Against. Okay. Lorraine.
Against, clearly.
Guy.
Thank you. Yeah.
For.
Marley.
For.
Katya.
For.
Fabian.
For.
Andrew.
For.
And for myself, it's against. How's that tally?
5-3, Chair, in favour.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. That brings our meeting to a close. Again, I can't remember when we meet next, but I'll see you then. Thank you very much for coming.